Julian, and here we are today to make like a kind of like a market update and discuss like events like concerning what's going on between like Ukraine and Russia. So the idea is like definitely not to take like a position in this conflict, just like to give like a general overview of like few key points about like this conflict and how like markets are moving to have like a better like macroeconomic understanding of like this conflict, and definitely talk about Bitcoin price, where it's heading, and make some kind of like small market analysis regarding Bitcoin. So first, I found that's quite relevant to make like some kind of a reminder of like why we are into crypto, guys. Is because we do definitely think that it's an edge against inflation. It's also a way to like really own your assets, right? Because like as this guy like mentioned, like when you are like in a war, or like you have some kind of like issues, you cannot definitely like access your banks. You have nothing left, right? In the past, we used to have like physical gold. Perhaps some of you do have some, but now we have crypto, right? So I think it's kind of cool to like show like, or like have an idea of like this kind of use in this world. And you can check online like videos of or like on Russia of like people who want to withdraw cash from the banks. It's super scary, right? And I don't know like the standards in Europe, but I do know like in France, like major commercial banks have like 5% of what they lend or what they have like emitted somehow like in their bank. So be careful with that, and always keep in mind like this kind of like idea. Another like quite funny tweet from Michael Saylor, who is the CEO of like MicroStrategy, the company who owns the biggest Bitcoin stack, if we can say that way, where he said like the only thing functioning as money everywhere in the world today is Bitcoin, and he's right. So it's quite funny, like Bitcoin is like some kind of like unstoppable, and it's super like interesting to see like how Bitcoin like is reacting during like this kind of like times, especially like this kind of like sanction of like Europe and America like pushing Russia out of the SWIFT system, which is like, to make it short, like a system all commercial banks are using like to deal with like wired and so on between all their clients and all their people using like the credit card and so on. So it's super important because like when you are out of like SWIFT, it's a major slowdown for your economy, for your growth and so on. It's super like kind of like a monopoly that is super strong. And funny stuff is that there is like a lot of speculation. We know that in the last few weeks before like the conflict, Russia passed few laws regarding Bitcoin, like about mining that is now legal, about the fact that I think there were like some kind of speculation where Russia would at some point ban Bitcoin. That's not the case at all. It's more the opposite. They are more going toward Bitcoin. And a lot of people speculate on the fact that probably Bitcoin will be like used by commercial banks in Russia sooner or later, or perhaps that they are developing like some kind of like an internal tool, or a tool like linked with like China, but it's just like guess is right. So funny like interesting like chart about Bitcoin in a monthly time frame. So you can see that we had like few bad months regarding like price action of Bitcoin, very bearish, which is like super nice because for people who want to invest, you are more likely to make a better investment, right, when price have already like reduced from like, I don't know, over 50%. So that's why I always try to keep like the big picture in mind, right? I see too many people only looking at 1 hour time frames, 4 hour time frames. It's too like too reactive on the market. I think looking at the big picture is also like super interesting to see like how things are moving like in a more general time frame. And so to go a bit more in details, we are still like in some kind of a range for Bitcoin, like in weekly and like daily, between like 65, between the all-time high and like $30,000. So always there are speculation of people who say that perhaps we'll enter a bear market and then break this range on the downside. But I'm quite optimistic, and I think we have like some nice absorptions, and the macro events are more like driving Bitcoin price toward like only up, as people say, than going down. And this kind of like weeks we have like some kind of like on this kind of price action, it's interesting because it means like we have a lot of absorptions on the buy side, which is like quite nice. Means like price are defended by whales or whatsoever. So regarding like now the price action, we had like the last few hours some kind of like a nice upward movement, but still like it's quite neutral. I think if we look at what happened in the last 30 or 40 days, like altcoin haven't moved a lot, so we are probably like some kind in a consolidation phase more than like an important trend. So funny fact, I don't know if that's funny, but Bitcoin price against Russian currency is at an all-time high. So because of like the Russian currency collapsed because of like all the sanctions we had like from European Union and America. So that's also interesting to sometimes look at Bitcoin price not only against dollar but against like other currency, because like forex pairs do move a lot. So it's quite interesting. So now let's look. Okay, that's the graph of the Russian currency. You see that we had like a bearish breakout and like a drop of like, I think like 30% in the last few days. So it's super bad like for Russians. It's like you wake up like one day and like all the assets you have compared to like other people's assets are like worth 30% less. It's quite scary for sure. That's why diversification in terms of investing and in terms of like portfolio is super good and is super relevant. And that's why, you know, even though like when you are in cash, let's say you are 100% USD, that's also interesting to look at other like kind of like a safe asset like gold or other like forex pairs like GDP or whatsoever. This is like the equivalent of like SP 500 in Russia. So first I was surprised about Russia. It's like in terms of GDP, it's ranked at 11th position. I thought like Russia was a bit bigger in terms of economy. But you can see that the price is like crazy, like the bearish structure is like crazy, and the market didn't open today since like, so it closed like on the 25th of February, and even like though people are not allowed to short anymore, so perhaps it will stop the bearish trend, but I would definitely not buy anything related to Russia right now. I'm way too scared, and I think I don't have like and enough like my expertise is not good enough to wonder like if it's interesting or not, like more like on investing side, or like just if you want to play the trade in your mind, but that's okay. This is a Russian banks, so always the same, be careful with what you buy. You don't know what, be really careful, make a lot of research before buying an asset, right? You don't know if like this bank can collapse and like default on their reserve or whatsoever, so always try to be very careful with what you buy. To make it short, SP 500 didn't move a lot. DYDX, which is like showing the strength of dollar, is still super strong and super like in a bullish trend. Oil also, it has record levels. It reached like over like $100 like Friday, I think, on the Friday session. So of course it's due to like the crisis in Ukraine. Let's look at gold, because like we had a crazy price action of like a move of like more than 6% last week. But on a bigger time frame, gold is starting to look super bullish, right? I think it's it was not like some kind of like an edge or doing anything during like the inflation narrative during the COVID crisis, but I think because of like the conflict in Russia, in Ukraine, gold is some kind playing like a reserve currency or an edge against like war and whatsoever. But also I had like few questions on the fact that are central banks really buying a lot of gold? It's super difficult to say. I've tried to look online at figures on what they are doing, but I didn't feel like there is much transparency behind like all central banks' balance sheet on like what they are buying, what they are selling. For example, we do know that Russian central banks are more likely to sell gold right now because they need to support the currency. So it's difficult to say and to play such a a trade with like a straightforward narratives. Silver is not doing much, so I'm not a big fan, and I will not advise you to look at silver. So funny stuff. I had seen on Twitter a bunch of like people tweeting about so COVID crisis is over. So all the narrative looking like, oh, we need to buy Pfizer, or all these biotech companies is now over, and people say now we need to go into companies that are being weapons or like related to military like production, rockets and so on. So I found that like a bit scary, but still people are really chasing to make some money. I don't have like a lot of expertise on that, to be honest, but you can look online few of the big names and try to look at the price action. I think it's interesting to look at how price we've evolved. Of course, I'm not like doing financial advice here. Always keep in mind that, but I found that quite cool. So here is Dassault. It's one of the biggest in the world, like top 10. It's a French company. I know a bit. The market cap is like 50 billion. And I think it's interesting to look at how you can use what for example, or what we discussed about on tech stocks regarding like valuation metrics and so on, and try to apply them on this kind of like sector, which is more related to like the army sector, and try to figure out what are the differences and so on. Always like more like for an educational purposes than doing a trade, of course, because I found it quite cool. I started to look at, for example, at this company, how people measure like the health of the company in this sector, why they are good, why they are not good, and so on. So I think it's quite interesting to look at, because we looked at a lot during the previous videos at tech sectors. Now it's interesting to look at all other kind of like market sectors. So definitely Bitcoin is starting to look super nice on a weekly time frame. So here one candle is like 1 week. So we can see we have like some kind of like the same price structure we had like last year during the summer, of like a big like upward movements, then going down, and some kind of like consolidation. So definitely Bitcoin is super volatile, so really be careful. Like the price movements within like 2 weeks is like super, it's insane, right? So be careful. But still we have like some kind of like similar patterns, and that's why I'm expecting to see, as we discussed, we had like a nice bounce from like the 33k level to like 45k, and now I think we will consolidate between like these two support and resistance, so of like $34,000 and like $46,000. So for people who wants to like take exposure to Bitcoin, the idea is like not to like FOMO in or whatsoever. It's always the same. Try to like place some like bits, like limit orders, like at a price you feel close to the support, and then you wait to see if you are executed or not. And people who have like exposure to Bitcoin, if you want to reduce your risk close to the resistance, why not? That's a good idea. And then you see like if you have like a massive breakout with like some kind of a retest, that would be like that. And then you just have to wait, at the pullback to get in a bit of like the exposure, or like, these are like classic, I think, price action patterns you should be like confident with. I will not discuss of like altcoins, because I feel it's super important to stay to look closely at Bitcoin and focus really on Bitcoin and Ethereum, the main one right now. Altcoins are a bit like, the risk reward is not that good for me, because I would rather like play Bitcoin the right way than being like fully like working on too many altcoins. But if I can recommend you to look at some altcoins, I would definitely recommend you to look at Binance Coin, Solana, AVAX, and Atom. They are super good looking, and it's quite easy to identify the price action. Okay, let's give an example, otherwise I'm not sure everybody will get it. But for example, Solana in 4 hours, you see that you have some kind of like price action that is super interesting. So definitely you have to wait a zone between like $95 and $85 to make like some buys, if you want to play like the long side, of course, of the trade, and then wait to see how it react like above like $120. So that's all for the video. I will try to do another one on altcoins for people who wants to see how to make some few trades on altcoins, but the idea was really to give like you some feedbacks about the crisis in Ukraine, and trying to figure out what's going on, how price are moving and so on. So see you soon, guys.